The M140 is an exceptional car. However, there is some things on it that could have been better from the factory, and I think BMW probably should have done. But if you are new here, this is my M140 Shadow Edition. I've had it for around 4 or 5 months now, and I've loved every second of it. But there is some things on this car that aren't quite up to scratch. So we're going to go into the things that this car should have had from the factory, and if you're looking to buy one, what you need to really be doing. But I will say this, it is all relative to what your plans are with the M140, because there is 2 different ends of the spectrum. You can either go for a street build and go for a casual, nice, daily style car, or you can go for a full track build. I haven't quite done it, but I know a lot of people do go for full track build, but you need to do some specific things. And the first one that I do want to go into is this right here, the suspension. The suspension on these cars are pretty good for a daily car. Out the factory, they are very comfortable, very smooth. You don't really feel many bumps for such a small car, which you'd expect to feel everything because they're so light. However, these do suffer with it, especially when you're driving it hard. They can feel very, very floaty. And the only way to counter that is if you put some upgraded suspension on. Now, there is so many different options you can choose from with this car. I know a lot of people go with companies like KW because I know they are very expensive, but they are very, very good. There is so many different options. You can go for springs if you wanted to, and that will make it feel that little bit more direct and a little bit more planted to the road. Of course, you do get the aesthetic look with it because it looks lower and more sporty, and everyone loves when cars look lower. I especially do, and I don't like how this sits because this is on standard suspension and it needs to really sit low. And now I've got the spacers on there as well. But suspension is a key component when you're driving this car hard, because this car does feel very floaty. Although it's comfortable, it just isn't designed to be driven hard as it sits right now. So suspension is a key thing. KW is probably your best option, but again, they are very, very expensive. You can go for some cheap springs. You can get springs now for about £300-400, especially a good set. And again, you get that lowered spec. So if you did want to drive this car hard, you need to go for suspension. Adjustable suspension will probably be your best option, some coilovers, because that gives you the option to A, lift it if it's too low, or B, lower it if it isn't low enough. Now, depending on what spec you get on your M140, is going to be a bit of a tricky one, because this doesn't have adaptable suspension. It just wasn't spec from the factory, and I didn't really care about getting one with adaptable suspension. However, if you did have it, I don't actually know the ins and outs to putting aftermarket suspension on adaptive suspension M140s. I don't actually know what it really does. I'm assuming it just affects the dampening. You might be able to swap them onto the new suspension, you might not be able to, so it's worth looking into. But if not, you can just swap them out and it will benefit you massively. And moving on to the next point, we're going to stay in that general area, and yes, we're going to the brakes and discs. Now again, these are city cars, so the brakes aren't the best. They're still decent cars, they've still got decent brakes, but if you are sending this car properly, you have to put upgraded brakes and discs on this car, because the ones on it from the factory aren't designed to go on track, which is pretty obvious. So you're going to have to put drilled and grooved discs on this car and upgrade the brakes. Now, in my opinion, the best bet for you to go is Brembo. Of course, Brembo is a massive brand. Everyone knows how good they are. You can get EBC brake pads, which are also really good. They're called yellow stuff, and it's essentially a racing pad, and they are very, very good. So Brembo, EBC, that sort of area is where you're going to want to be for your discs and pads. So having the drilled and grooved discs and the EBC pads with some suspension on this car, this is going to be a serious animal for the track. Now, yes, it is very beneficial to have big stopping power as well as big power. And that brings me on to my next point, getting this car mapped. Because from the factory, these are 335 brake horsepower. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a lot of horsepower for a small hot hatch like this, especially from the factory. However, if you are putting the discs, the pads, the suspension on this car, you're most likely going to be taking it around a track. And on the track, you want as much power as possible, but usable power. So I would definitely recommend getting this car tuned. And I've said it in the past, these cars are so capable when it comes to tuning, because it has that massive 3-litre straight-six B58 engine, and we all know what the B58 is capable of. people have these tuned up to 700 horsepower of stock internals, and you could just get a flash map like this M140. This is a stage 1 tune from Mallory Performance, and it is running 420 brake horsepower, and that is without any mods, and it does make the car feel 10 times faster, although it's only around about 100 brake. Now 100 brake is massive off just a flash map, and you're probably thinking, how can you get almost 100, it's about 85 brake horsepower without anything? And now it's because these cars are probably around 370 brake horsepower from the factory. BMW always underdo it. They say it's 335 brake, but it's not. People have these dynoed at 370 brake from the factory. So essentially you're only gaining about 50 to 60, which is around about right for a flash map. So I would definitely recommend getting this car tuned because you can get so much power. If I'm not wrong, a stage 2 will get you around about 450. A stage 2 plus will get you about 480. And that stage 2 plus would consist of the map, the intake under the bonnet, and maybe an exhaust. Little stuff like that will get this car to almost 500 brake horsepower. Now that is plenty of power to be taking this car around the track, because I said they are quick as it is. And especially when you've got the map, when you've got the exhaust, you've got the intake, you've got the suspension, the discs and pads, this car can be an absolute weapon. And that is why they say the M140 is an M car killer, because without doing a fat lot, you could spend a couple of £100 for a stage 1 tune and you can get 420 brake horsepower, which is already around about the same as an F80 M3. And especially when you spend a little bit more, putting a few more mods onto it, it's going to be better. So if you want this car to be absolutely rapid for a small price, get this car tuned. Now the next one that I want to go into, which is just as essential as the rest of these mods that I've listed off already, and that is getting rid of that awful open diff and putting an LSD on it. Because let me tell you now, if this car had an LSD on it, it would be a completely different car. That open diff essentially ruins the back end, because you're trying to slide this car, it is way too unpredictable. You just do not know what it's going to do, because traction control will kick in at any point and it will just send the car the other way. So putting an LSD on it will make the car way more predictable and way more ready for the track. And it goes back to what I said before about feeling in tune with the car and feeling at one with the car, especially when you're driving it hard, because having an LSD, you know exactly where the car's going to go, because them back wheels are essentially moving in the same direction at all times. If you know the car's going to step out, you know how to counter it. With an open diff, if the car steps out, the car will help you, but you'll be trying to do it as well. So you'll almost go too far and then you have to correct it again. So an LSD is going to make this car way more predictable when you're taking it around the track. And I think BMW knew exactly what they were doing with it, because you can buy an M Performance LSD from BMW. So they knew people were going to want to put an LSD on this car, and they knew this car would never be capable of its full potential without an LSD. Now, don't get me wrong, the M Performance LSD is very expensive, but a lot of people do it. So if you have got the money to do it and you are going to fully send this car, you need to put an LSD on. You need to fork out that cash for it, because this car just will not be at its full potential without it. And the last one that I want to go into is this. The M Performance, no, I'm joking, it's not these, but I do want to say these cars look very bog standard from the factory. So you're going to want to put a few cosmetic modifications on it, as well as doing the performance modifications. And that includes things like lightweight wheels, which will help you out massively, because I would have thought these wheels are very heavy from the factory. Don't get me wrong, they do look really good, but you're going to want to put some lighter wheels on it. And of course, as I said, these do look very bog standard from the factory. I've done a few cosmetic things and I think they do look really good. You're going to want a splitter kit on it, because then you've got the performance of a track car, but you want it to kind of look like a race car almost. So stick some splitter kits on it and a few cosmetics. Probably stick a spoiler on it as well, because that will help you just that little bit more. And of course, don't forget about the exhaust. Although this is cosmetic and it does have the carbon tips, you are going to want to put a louder exhaust on, because it will help it breathe that little bit better. As well as the intake. So with all that, you have the full package. You have the wheels, the suspension, the brakes, the cosmetics and the tune, and you have a nice LSD on the back. So you are now ready to take this car to the track, and you won't run into the same issues that a lot of street builds run into, where they're just not quite at their full potential. They're just not quite what they should have been. And after you put all of those mods on, you will have the ultimate M140. So go out, get an M140, and if you are taking it on a track, go and get everything I've just listed, because I'm telling you now, there is very, very, very few things on the road that will beat this car around a track, or even on the road once you've done everything. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Stay tuned for more videos like this, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.